All right. Hey, everybody. I thought I would do another live. I'm still trying to get used to this software. I wanted to do a few more lives to see if I can figure out some of this functionality a little better. So come say hi. Hope you're having a great week. It's Friday, isn't it? Yeah. Hope you have a great weekend planned. And yeah, if you got any questions or anything, come let me know. Hi, Logan. Hi, Diaz. Hey, Blythe or Blythe? Not sure exactly how that is going to go. Was Paul a universalist? There are some folks who argue that. We do have this this statement about this individual in, I believe it's 2 Corinthians, who's causing some problems with some sexual activity, and he says to basically to give him up to the buffetings of Satan so that his soul will be saved in the end. So it seems like it's not the traditional soteriology that we see. Hey, Felipe, thank you so much. Hey, Theophilus, Skeptical Solomon, Dan is so cute. Thank you for capitalizing everything there. Hi, Moon Shoes, final grades in, winter break. Cool Watchman, thank you, Logan. Hey, Dan, what can you say about marital SA? That it wasn't really a thing in the Bible. At least not in the Hebrew Bible. In the New Testament, actually, yeah, I don't think it was much of a thing in the New Testament either. However, I just got a new book called Marriage in the Bible by Jennifer Bird. What do the texts say? And I have a feeling that it's going to go into that in some great detail. But based on what I've read about marriage in the New Testament, the wife was more or less the property of her husband and didn't have much autonomy, much control over her own body, and so was expected to be available whenever. Do you have any good online resources for finding / searching ancient manuscripts, documents? Most of the ones I found are either limited, terrible to search, or not available to the public. The ones I use are ones that you've got to purchase. So Accordance Bible software is probably the best one out there, I think, particularly for primary texts like manuscripts and documents and stuff. If you're looking for like New Testament manuscripts, there are websites that you can go to where you can get pretty good you can get a pretty good look at stuff. The Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts, for instance, has a website, manuscripts.csntm.org, that allows you to get a look at an awful lot of manuscripts. And I think there's another one. There's another website called Nemo's Library. I think it's a blog. But one of the posts is transcripts of earliest New Testament manuscripts. And they go through, looks like, dozens of manuscripts, and they have transcriptions, and it says with image, so they may have photographs as well of each manuscript. Let me take a look. And it goes to Munster University's Institute for Neutestamentliche Textforschung. Yeah, it looks like they have photos of the manuscripts as well. But yeah, like things that are tagged and everything like that, for that you want something like Accordance. Logos is another Bible software, but Accordance has a lot more in the way of primary text, I think. Actually, Logos has a lot of primary text, but I think Accordance has better search functions and tagging and things like that. Finally caught one. Do you ever get tired of having to say the same things in your response videos? No, not really. It's actually easier for me. If I already know what to say, then it's an easier video for me to make. And I understand that there are new people who are seeing these videos all the time. So it's something that I think is understandable. Always had a question about Deuteronomy 33:27. Why is the NRSV UE translation of that passage different from others, such as the NIV? I don't know off the top of my head what Deuteronomy 33:27 says. Let me take a look. Okay, so the NRSV says he subdues the ancient gods, or the eternal God is a dwelling place. Yeah, so it's probably just a different interpretation of the noun there, interpreting it as a verb, probably a participle of some kind. Shatters the forces of old. Zeroot. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Let me see if there's any commentary in the SBL Study Bible which uses the NRSVUE. I don't think they usually have much commentary where there's a different translation choice, but 33:27 on the theme of the Lord's triumph over the ineffective gods of Canaan. See 7:4 and 25, Exodus 23, 1 Samuel 5, 2 Samuel 7. So I imagine this is a kind of a mixture of a different understanding of some of the grammar here and a contextual interpretation that leads to that. But I don't know the specifics of that particular verse, so I can't go into any more detail than that. Been searching today for your recommendation on ancient sexuality. Losing job over this soon? Well, I'm awfully sorry to hear that. I don't know precisely what recommendation you're talking about on ancient sexuality, but I can show you a bibliography that I provided for folks who purchased access to my online class on homosexuality in the Bible. I provide a one-page bibliography for all the classes, the online classes that I do. So if you give me just 1 second, I'll put that up on the screen, and you're welcome to screenshot that, and you can check out the text in there. All right, let's see. Just gotta find the right window. There we go. Okay. So this is the bibliography that I provided when I taught the online class on homosexuality in the Bible, which I believe should be at mcclellan.org if anybody is interested in purchasing access to that. But for now, if you want to do a screenshot here, go ahead. And most of the things that I would recommend on ancient sexuality are going to be included in here. So go ahead and take that screenshot quick, because I'm going to shut her down in 3, 2, and 1. All right. I hope that is somewhat helpful, and I'm sorry to hear about you losing your job. That is awful. What is your view of the historicity of David and Solomon? Seems to be some indirect evidence, Tel Dan Stele, Menander's Phoenician sources, but nothing direct. Yeah, the closest we have is the reference in the Tel Dan Stele to the House of David, which could refer to a dynasty that was begun by someone named David. I think most scholars would say it's not indicative of a full-fledged kingdom, that David was probably ran a chiefdom out of Jerusalem, the smaller southern kingdom of Judah. I think there's a likelihood that there's something there, but it has had so much extra stuff accreted to it. There's not a ton that we can tell. Joel Baden and Jacob Wright have the 2 best books on a historical David. I don't know that there's a ton about Solomon that is available, but the idea that these were one of the things that tends to happen as these royal annals get put together is that people who have usurped authority tend to tell stories where their authority was legitimate and was freely given by the person before them. And so we see that kind of thing going on in these stories, which is something that is probably more fiction than fact. What is the book of the wars of the Lord? Any thoughts on the lost books of the Bible? I wish we had them, but these were probably other historical prose texts that were in circulation, probably around the middle of the first millennium BCE, that just did not get preserved with the rest of the texts that got preserved in what is now the Hebrew Bible, and it just went the way of the dodo. What is your interpretation of Revelation 2:17, discussing white stones with a new name written on them, given to those who are victorious? I think this is an element of a conceptualization of divinization, and I don't know that we have too much more that we can know about that, apart from the fact that there are other references to new names in the book of Revelation that have to do with God. God writes their name on people's foreheads and things like that, which indicate possession, belonging, loyalty, protection, things like that. So I would argue that has something to do with a person becoming a part of this divine family or household. Best argument for women / your daughters in ministry. There's not really a case to make against it, apart from some biblical texts that we have to negotiate with anyway. We've already negotiated away so much of what the biblical texts say, uh, keeping women out of ministry because of some cherry-picked biblical texts that probably weren't even written by the people they claim to be written by anyway, is, in my opinion, a pretty problematic way to go about things. Hey, Dan, can you talk about the Tyre city in Lebanon? The city of Tyre was used to be an island. Alexander the Great laid siege to it, and hang on just a second. Alexander the Great laid siege to it, spent, I think, about a year bringing just soil and stones and things to basically create a causeway all the way out to the island. And that causeway has been there ever since, and now it is a little peninsula sticking out. And there are some prophecies in the Hebrew Bible about Tyre, particularly like Ezekiel 28 is about the king of Tyre. Tyre and Sidon are the two main cities associated with Phoenicia that are mentioned in the Bible. But there's not much to those. Like there are folks who try to argue that these prophecies came true, and there's not really a good case to make for that. Constellation Pegasus, thank you so much for the super chat question. It says, is Lilith mentioned in the OT? Yes, in, I want to say, Isaiah 34, 14, 11? Yeah, 14. It's translated in the King James Version, screech owl, but that's Lilith, Lilith. I've seen some scholars say they're not sure because of the difficulty of the text. I don't think the text is that difficult. The overwhelming consensus is that this is Lilith. And when does Lilith first appear in ancient Israel? Well, we only have this one mention in Isaiah, but Lilith comes from earlier Mesopotamian literature written in Akkadian. Lilitu seems to be a specific class of deity, probably associated with the feminine divine, with deviant sexuality, things like that. And it really comes into early Judaism in the Common Era in late antiquity. We have this attempt to harmonize the two creation accounts in Genesis 1 and then in 2 and 3 by saying there were that the man and the woman created in Genesis 1 were created simultaneously. Eve is created after Adam in Genesis 2, which suggests to some early Jewish interpreters of the text that there was a woman created simultaneously with Adam who is absent from the text once Eve is created. And this gives way to this idea that Adam had a first wife in the Garden of Eden before Eve was created. And then we get this text called the Alphabet of Ben Sirah from between around 700 and 1000 CE. that identifies that first wife as Lilith. And the idea is that it says that Lilith wanted to be on top, and Adam said that she was not fit to be on top, that only he was fit to be on top. And she storms out of the Garden of Eden. God sends 3 angels after her to bring her back, Sonoi, Sansonoi, and Samangalov. And she says, no, I'm not going back. I'm going to go, I'm going to afflict newborns with disease and illness and death. And I'm going to cause problems for men in their sleep and things like that. And I will not have any power over any newborn who has an amulet with your 3 names on it. And so this is probably an etiology for why people were using apotropaic amulets to try to protect infants from illness. So lots of cool stuff having to do with that. But yeah, Lilith is definitely an OT. Thank you, Logan. I appreciate it. Thanks for bringing biblical scholarship to the mainstream. It's my pleasure, and I'm glad you find it helpful. And thank you, as well. I appreciate the super chat. Hey, Dan, I was wondering on the Hebrew word used for slave, it also can be used as servant. So how would that affect Leviticus 25:44? Well, Leviticus 25:44 is saying you can buy and sell these folks from the foreigners around you, and you can pass them down as inheritance, for they are your achuzah, which means property, possessions. This is 100% chattel slavery. So the fact that it can mean servant does not mean that you can just arbitrarily decide when it's going to mean servant and when it's not. It's very clearly slave in Leviticus 25:44. And I would say in the majority of uses in the legislative literature, it should be understood as slave rather than as servant. Around Leviticus 25:44 through 46, and in fact, the second half of verse 46, it talks about, it says, you should not treat your Israelite Avdim as slaves, but treat them as servants. And it uses another word for servant, and for whatever reason, I'm blanking on exactly what that word was. But when it wants to make that distinction, Hebrew can make that distinction very easily. But there is no argument to make that Leviticus 25:44 through 46 is about servants and not about chattel slavery. It's 100% about chattel slavery. I've noticed that marriage in the Hebrew Old Testament was polygynous, whilst the Greco-Roman New Testament was monogamous. A good example of culture shaping the morality of God. I don't think there's anything in the New Testament that indicates that marriage was monogamous, at least prescriptively monogamous. Surely there were monogamous marriages, but polygamy was something that was only challenged by certain strains of Jewish thought and tradition. And I don't know that we see much of that in, or I don't know that there's any passage in the New Testament that explicitly problematizes polygamy. North Pole, thank you for the super sticker. I still need to learn what a super sticker means. Sir Friendzone, thank you very much. I loved your recent video on Xmas. I've been making a similar argument for the past 15 years. It was very affirming to see your more educated take. Well, thank you. I appreciate the very kind words. And hopefully that makes it easier for you to make that argument when you have to in the future. Sky Skinner, thank you for sharing your work and your great citations. Thank you so much. It's changed how I look at the Bible and literature as a whole, even comic books. Well, awesome. Then it's working. I appreciate that. Favorite comic series? That is, that's a difficult one. I was just on a podcast called Office Hours with Dr. C, and he is on TikTok as well. But we did 2 episodes where we talked about 2 of my favorite comics series. One was the initial run of Spawn, when Todd McFarlane and then Greg Capullo were the pencilers, and then the other was the Death and Life of Superman arc. Those were very, very formative in my early years with comic books. So those are 2 that that when I think about comic books, those are the things that kind of sit at the foundation of my understanding of what comics are and can be. Skeptical Solomon, what is your personal preference on the book of Ephesians? Do you think we'll ever know Paul wrote 100%, or will be unknown or argued like it is? I think it'll be argued. I don't think we'll discover anything that will allow us to definitively determine 100% whether or not it's original. Can you please explain one more time real quick why you say Adonai? I can't find the video. So if you go to my TikTok page, it's one of the 3 pinned videos. But basically, I had some Jewish folks and friends who asked me if I would not mind not pronouncing the divine name on my social media, and it's not a costly thing for me to do. That is an accommodation that is not difficult for me. So I said, sure, I'm happy to do that. It's something that I see that's something that you experience in the academy frequently, so not a big deal. Is that a bass or a guitar in the background? This is my Martin. I forget exactly what model, but that is an acoustic guitar. I grew up on Martins, so that's what I've always had. The last podcast episode talked a little about the northern and southern kingdoms being 2 completely different countries. Do you know how we can read more about that difference? Israel Finkelstein wrote a wonderful book called The Forgotten Kingdom that is an open access book. So it was published in the same series that my book was published in, SBL Press's Ancient Near East Monograph series. So if you Google Israel Finkelstein, The Forgotten Kingdom, you can find a PDF of that. And that's primarily about the Northern Kingdom, but we'll talk about how these 2 kingdoms were separate kingdoms. That's probably going to be the most accessible way for you to be able to read about that. Will you be doing an audiobook version of your eventual book release? Absolutely. Saggy, thank you very much for the super chat. Hi, Dan. Thank you for all the wonderful content. Is there any data that supports the idea that religion dulls critical thinking skills? There's been a lot of research on this. I don't know that there's anything that indicates it, what we label religion, which itself is an issue. In fact, I'm teaching an online class on the 27th on what is religion. But I don't know that there are any studies that have shown it has a dulling effect. But there are studies that show that folks who use less analytical or critical thinking are more likely to be religious. And so suggesting the direction of influence there is something that most scholars will shy away from. But I think most people would say that it is more that people who don't engage as much in critical and analytical thinking are drawn to religion more than that religion somehow influences people's ability to think critically. There are a lot of there's an overlap between what we label religion and other kind of social forces that can incentivize people not to think critically and analytically about things. There's overlap in religion and in other things, social, cultural domains that are not associated with religion, where those forces are also at work. So I wouldn't say that those those forces are part of religion. They're something different, but they happen to overlap with religion. Dead pirate tattoo. Why do I trust you so much? It's not because I'm handsome. I know that. But I can't say for sure. LDEM. Thank you so much for the super, I believe, chat. That I appreciate it very much. Okay, and I've got to catch up. So, what D&D character are you running? I put together a. All right, hold on. Sorry, just a moment. Okay, I put together a character with the help of our dungeon master, DM, a dragonborn blue wizard, and my podcast co-host recommended a name for me, so I'm going to go by Dandolf. So this will be the first time I've ever played this game. I actually missed out on an opportunity yesterday to do a little run through to see how it goes. So I literally have no idea how to play this game. So it'll be an experience. But for those of you who don't know, I am participating in a charity D&D campaign tonight that will start at 7 p.m. Central Time. That will benefit an organization that works to promote the separation of church and state. So yeah, if you're in the mood, you have the time, go ahead and join us. You can find information on it. I don't know exactly where you can find all the information on it, but if you go to my Twitter account at McClellan, McLelan, I recently retweeted something from Captain Dadpool that has a link to it if you want to check it out. Are you actually related to Ewan McGregor? I am not. I frequently have people tell me that I look like I'm awful with names when I'm on the spot. Dang it. It's on Cheers. Woody Harrelson, that's the one. Daniel King, a fellow missionary under President Gardner. I don't know if you remember me very, very vaguely. I've been watching for a while and find your videos very interesting. It makes me see Bible passages differently. Well, awesome. I appreciate that. I'm glad that that's doing that. That's a big part of the goal. Yes, I do still consider myself Christian. Is there an easy way to find out the consensus of scholarship on any given issue within biblical scholarship? Not yet, but I and some colleagues are actually working on a large-scale survey that's going to do precisely that. We're going to ask dozens and dozens of questions about different issues that are being debated within scholarship to see where scholars stand on it. Excuse me. Miss Mentats, thank you so much for the super chat question. I have a fascination with cults. What would your definition of a cult be, and why are Scientologists so weird? I actually don't define, well, if I had to define cult, it would be a religion that I don't like. That's the word cult is a pejorative that primarily is used that way. There's no way to reduce it to a single set of necessary and sufficient features that limits it to those things that are labeled cults and only those things that are labeled cults. And critical scholars don't use that term. It is not analytically useful today. And so there's a wonderful scholar named Megan Goodwin who talks an awful lot about cults. There's also another colleague of mine, Brad Stoddard, who's a wonderful scholar of religion who recently did a podcast episode. I forget the name of the podcast, but talks about the origin of that usage of cult. It kind of starts in the mid 20th century and gets rolling in the 60s and 70s because a lot of parents of young and adult children were upset that they were running off to the woods with weirdos. And so you have the rise of counter and anti-cult movements, some of them secular, some of them religious, but this created this this industry for anti and counter cult stuff and created this entire field of study on cults that came up with these ideas about deprogramming and about brainwashing and about all these things. And none of it really had an academic scientific basis. And in the late 80s and early 90s, there were some high profile court cases where the courts asked these people to substantiate these claims and they were unable to. And the evidentiary basis for the whole concept of cults, the bottom just fell out of it. And so since the early 90s, cult research has become kind of a fringe pseudo-academic thing. So I don't like the word cult. I don't use it. New religious movements is what most scholars will use today. High control religions or high demand religions is another label that people will use because cults is used very differently than how scholars want to talk about religions. Okay, something just refreshed on here. So Dead pirate tattoo. Now I understand why I trust you. Well, whatever it was I said, I appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear that. Ben Brill, I was wondering about 2 Kings and the she-bears. I was told it's young men yell death threats, not children tease prophet. How reasonable is this? Not. It's children tease prophet. But and it's kind of a it's one of those urban legends, like horror stories, things you tell kids at scout camp to freak them out and try to get them to behave better. It's basically, don't rag on the prophet, or this kind of stuff will happen, because what they're doing is challenging the legitimacy of his authority, and this is a way to show God demonstrating, no, this prophet has my authority. So yeah, trying to make excuses for it just doesn't work. Covey, thank you so much for the question. Now that you're no longer a student, how many pages a week do you read to keep up with scholarship? How do you find the time? I don't think I don't think I've kept track of pages. It's actually not as much as it used to be, and I get up quite early, and have not been doing as much reading as I should be doing. But yeah, I'm reading every day, a little bit every day, but it's been I can tell you it's been weeks since I've sat down and spent more than 30 or 45 minutes at a time reading a paper or a book or something like that. So and it's primarily because of all the social media stuff I'm getting into. So I will read bits and pieces of dozens of different things every single day. But a whole paper or like a whole chapter of a book or something like that, it's been a long time since I've done that in a single sitting. Whoops, don't know what happened there. Greetings, how are you? Big fan of Superman. Me too. So if the Bible is not the word of God and the being mentioned in it is not God, who is it and where does the idea come from? Well, that's a, I don't know exactly what question you're asking there, but that's based on a theological statement, and I don't really do theological statements here. I do primarily just deal with critical scholarship and the data, and where the idea of God comes from the cognitive science of religion is kind of complex. But in short, there are kind of cognitive default settings that predispose us to conjure up unseen agents in the world around us to explain and account for a lot of different things. And as those concepts get shared on a social level and social frameworks develop to curate our relationship with these unseen agents, and you get rituals and things like that that can provide what's called pro-social forces for the society, can aid in social cohesion within the society. Those rituals and those frameworks become more important to the growth and the survival of the society, and you can begin to develop these divine profiles that turn these entities, these unseen agents, into deities of all different kinds. I talk about it in some detail in my book, Adonai's Divine Images. This is an open access book. You can find a link directly to the PDF on my link tree. But chapter 1 is, what is a deity? And I go through and explain where deity concepts come from. I am not sure if somebody is using homophobic slurs in the comments, but please don't do that. What is your view on the Trinity? That it is a philosophical development that started in the 2nd century CE and was took the main shape that has had for the last 1500 years in the 5th century CE. Do you believe Unitarianism is the biblical view? No, Unitarianism comes along much later. Do you play any video games? Not really. GoldenEye was the last video game I played with any regularity, which dates me. But yeah, I haven't had the time to play video games for a while. I would like to hear the context for Psalm 137:9. I think that is the imprecatory psalm, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, how blessed, Ashrei, which is the Hebrew term that is translated Makari, or blessed from the Beatitudes, is the one who grabs your babies and smashes them on a rock. So this is a reference to Babylon. This is kind of lamenting the Babylonian exile, and it's just fantasizing about vengeance against the Babylonians in an incredibly violent way. Christopher Mosqueda, you know the answer to that is 42. Do you have any thoughts on the development of the Noahide laws? Any good books? David Carr, The Formation of Genesis 1 through 11, talks about the precursors and the inspirations for a lot of the stories that are going on in the primeval history. Talks a little bit about that. Any recommendations for ancient Israel documentaries? Ooh. None that I can think of that are strictly about ancient Israel. There are ones about the Bible that spend a lot of time talking about ancient Israel, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Francesca Stavrakopoulos, I believe it's called The Bible. Is it The Bible's Buried Secrets? I think there are 2 documentaries that go by that title. And so I want the BBC one, I believe. Yeah, The Bible's Buried Secrets, with Francesca Stavrakopoulou, my dissertation supervisor. That's a wonderful one. All right. Blythe, thank you, or Blythe or Blythe, whichever is the correct pronunciation. Thank you so much. What do you think about the scholarship of the Bible for normal people with Pete Enns and Jared Bias? It is more theologically oriented than my work, but Pete is wonderful. I think he does a great job, and I contributed a story to a forthcoming children's Bible storybook. And I think they've got commentaries on books of the Bible for normal people. I think Revelation for Normal People may have just come out. I think those are very helpful. Also thoughts on Bible Project. I love their format. I love what they're doing. I disagree with some of their hermeneutics, but they're even more theological than the Bible for Normal People. So, it's to be expected. So I disagree with a lot of things that they talk about. Love your work. Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words and the super chat. Excuse me. Okay, I can see I'm well behind on the comments, which is how this always goes. So I'm going to try to move a little quicker. Any recommendations on the books about textual criticism? So if you want a really technical one, but like the text critical Bible for the Hebrew Bible, that would be Emmanuel Tov, Textual Criticism of the Hebrew Bible. There is another one called, I have a copy over here. It would take me too long to find. I think it's called a student's, let me see if I get that right. A student's guide to textual, yes, that's it. A Student's Guide to Textual Criticism of the Bible by Paul Wegner. That was one that I had in graduate school that goes through the history of textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible, textual criticism of the New Testament. It is not nearly as thorough and as detailed as Emmanuel Tov's, but is more accessible. What's your favorite book of the Bible, other ancient texts to read casually? I haven't read casually for years, apart from reading books with my daughters before bed. Favorite book of the Bible, I would probably have to say, that's a tough one. I've done a lot of work with what's going on in Deuteronomy. I think Exodus is probably the most influential and the most fascinating. Psalms is the richest, I think. Mark is my favorite to just kind of sit down and just get immersed in that world. John McDonald, thank you so much for the super chat. Hi, Dan. I'm a linguist who focuses on perception, indexicality, and enregistrement. Have you ever come across critical analysis of the Bible/Christian denominations that use this framework? I have seen monographs that are focused on certain issues and themes and things like that incorporate those frameworks. I don't know that I've seen one where that is like the main point of the whole monograph is incorporating that framework. I don't know about Christian denomination, like incorporating those frameworks into critical analysis of Christian denominations. That I have never seen. But there are series on linguistic approaches to the Bible and specific books of the Bible and themes associated with the Bible. They're usually going to be published by Springer or by Brill, but nothing springs to mind off the top of my head for those particular frameworks. I'm sorry I can't be too much more helpful than that. Hang on a second. Let me see if something pops up in my... Yeah, I'm searching for these terms in my digital library, and there are books on cognitive linguistics, the psychology of personhood, things like that. One book on the Bible pops up, Jeffrey Stacker's Deuteronomy and the Pentateuch, but I would be surprised if that is more than just a passing reference. Let me see. Yeah, it's not talking about indexicality as a linguistic framework. It's just talking about having to do with indexing things, contextualization of second person address in D, the D source. Yeah, so nothing's springing to mind. But there are series that are published by publishers like Brill and like Springer that deal with those kinds of technical frameworks. In True Detective, Detective Russ Cole says certain linguistic anthropologists think that religion is a language virus that rewrites the pathways in the brain, dulls critical thinking. Any truth? That sounds an awful lot like Dawkins and some conspiracy theorists. There are some discussions about high demand religions, high control religions, and how certain brain injuries tend to be more commonly associated with participation in high demand religions. The notion that it is the participation in those religions that actually causes brain injuries or that causes those things, I don't think there's much, if any, support at all for that. Stephen Caruso, thank you so much. How do you reconcile thousands of God stories that vary by religion, culture, and time period, BC made up, with belief? Ever engaged with Richard Carrier's work? I don't reconcile because my social media presence is not about my own personal belief. I'm just looking at the thousands of God stories that vary by region, culture, and time period. Yeah, I've engaged with Richard Carrier's stuff in the past, however briefly. I have other friends who've done it in print and more thoroughly than I have on social media. Kip Davis, James McGrath, Daniel Galata, and others. But yeah, Richard Carrier's work is not accepted by the mainstream. It's toward the periphery of the scholarship, but it is definitely very vociferous and definitely has a very committed fan base. But yeah, as far as what I do, reconciliation is not a part of what I do on social media. But thank you for the question, and I'm sorry for I still have a bit of a cough from an illness from a few weeks ago. Wait, is Dan a Christian? Yes, I am an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Where in the UK did you go recently? We were in London and also Oxford. The next time I am in London, I would be happy to try to get something thrown together. When did the Hebrews become known as Jews? Difficult question, because Jews is one of multiple different ways to translate Judaioi, a Greek term that begins as in the Greco-Roman period. That could be a reference to an ideology, could be a reference to a regional identity, could be a reference to an ethnic identity, could be a reference to a lot of different things. That is something that is still fiercely debated by scholars, when exactly we can speak of Jews in the sense we understand the word today. And that's something that I'm not directly engaged in that debate, and so I don't have a dog in that fight. So I'm happy to suspend judgment until a clear consensus emerges. Ick Burr, thanks for the Oxford Annotated Bible recommendation. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that that was helpful. I hope you enjoy. Oh, did Emmanuel revise? Is he coming out with a 5th edition of textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible? I have his first 3. I have figured that the 4th was not going to make too many changes, but if there's already a 5th one coming out, maybe I need to catch up. Any recommendations on the book about early Christian and Jews spread in ancient Arabia that might influence Islam? Ooh, I'm aware that discussions about that are ongoing, but I'm afraid I don't know anything off the top of my head that would help there. Sorry, I wish I could be more helpful about that. What is... Ooh, sorry, I'm still trying to figure these things out. Science Explains. Dan, was the current Septuagint updated to match the Christian scriptures, or did the Christian Bible quotes that match the Septuagint originate in the Septuagint or something else? The latter. The Septuagint was not altered to match Christianity. There are 3 recensions that were created in the 2nd century CE, 2 of them by, I think, Jewish authors and 1 by a Christian author. If you want to know the role of the Septuagint in Christianity, there's a wonderful book by my thesis supervisor from the University of Oxford, T. Michael Law, called When God Spoke Greek. It talks about the influence of the Septuagint on early Christianity. That's one of the best discussions, best and most accessible discussions that's out there right now. Thank you for the kind words, everybody. By the way, I'm scrolling through I see a lot of comments that are thanking me for my work, and that's very kind of you. I appreciate that. It means a lot. Dan, question: when Ezekiel speaks about the king of Tyre, is it comparing him to Adam or the serpent? It's closer to Adam. The whatever story of Eden is being represented in Ezekiel, it's not our story of Eden. It's talking about the mountain of God. It's talking about these stones. It's talking about a lot of stuff that is never mentioned anywhere in Genesis 2 and 3. There's nothing that connects it with the serpent. That is wishful thinking. It talks about a covering cherub, which has absolutely nothing to do with the serpent. Michael Heiser put a case for it being the serpent. Yeah, that's kind of that's defending the traditional identification. That's just looking for a way to find an identification of the serpent as Satan in the Hebrew Bible, because the Hebrew Bible nowhere identifies the serpent as Satan. So I think Mike was going beyond the data there to try to make that case. But the scholarly consensus is that it has nothing to do with the serpent. And none of the things that are mentioned about being in the garden, about the being created perfect, and then there was evil found in you and you were cast out, like that's the human, that's not the serpent. I'm seeing the super chat questions pop up now as I'm scrolling, which indicate to me that I am way behind on the comments. So I apologize if you've just asked something, and then we have to go because it's probably going to be a bit before I get to it. Hey, brother. So the internet say Kane Bosom is cannabis. How high are you? All love, brother. Familiar with that argument. I don't think it's incredibly convincing, just based on kind of the phonetic proximity of those two words. However, we don't have to go to that to see that cannabis was something that was in use at the time. The Judahite temple at Arad, there were two incense altars that were found right in front of the Holy of Holies, and the shorter one had burned substance on it that was tested, and they found 3 different types of cannabis. We also know there was a burial near further north in the hill country of a young woman who died in childbirth, and there was a substance that was found located right around where the lungs would have been before her body deteriorated, that they tested and found contained cannabis, which they interpreted as an indication they were using it medically to try to treat her pain in that painful childbirth that ended up killing her. So cannabis was being used for medical as well as for ritual purposes in ancient Israel. We know that for a fact. We don't need these speculative linguistic arguments. Totally down for a SoCal meetup. How would we know if something were to be planned? So I mentioned recently in a live that I may be going to Southern California second half of January to do some filming, and some folks have suggested I organize some kind of meetup, which I would be happy to do. So if those plans do solidify, I will find a way to let folks know. Have you read Constantine's Sword by James Carroll? I have not. Sorry, I cannot offer any thoughts. Hi, Sniper. Is that how your handle is pronounced? Hope you're doing well. Hi, Dan. I saw your video about John 10:30, where Jesus says he's one with God. You say it's oneness of purpose. Not necessarily oneness of purpose, just a oneness that is not indicative of a shared identity. It's the oneness that is discussed in John 17, where Jesus prays in the intercessory prayer 3 times that his followers become one with him, just as he is one with the Father. My question is, why in John 10:33 the Jews accuse him of blasphemy, making himself God? So they don't say he makes himself God. There is no definite article there. It says you make yourself a God. Being a man or being human, you make yourself a God, or you make yourself divine. It's not saying you make yourself the God. But claiming divinity could be interpreted as blasphemy as well. Blasphemy was not only saying I am God. Blasphemy was any kind of denigration or criticism of deity or the divine name. So just saying, yeah, I'm one with God. I'm united with God in some way. Could absolutely be interpreted as blasphemy. Zayer, thank you so much for the super chat. Hey Dan, 3 Qs. Favorite church father, Origin. 2, favorite god, goddess, Asherah. 3, if there was one extra biblical text we've uncovered that you could add to the canon, what text would you choose? That's an interesting one. That's a difficult one because Second Maccabees. Well, it was kind of part of the canon. It wasn't something that we uncovered. What's something that we uncovered? Most of the stuff we uncover is Gnostic, and I think Gnostic literature is absolutely fascinating, but I don't think it's helpful. Yeah, that's a tough one. Probably something from the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are a couple of Psalms that, or the songs of the Sabbath sacrifice. Yeah, probably not the War Scroll. There's a manuscript called the Son of God text, which is fun as well. Do you feel that people like Jordan Peterson and his assertion that the Bible is fundamental to shaping all of Western concepts are correct? No, and I've made videos on that. And what is your overall opinion of him? He's a mediocre psychologist who became famous for being transphobic and is just going to ride that as long and as hard as he can. He found a cash cow, and he's going to milk it. And and he blocked me on Twitter. So I went searching for something that I heard he had said, and I'm blocked now. So he's not a huge fan of mine either. At a literary level, would you choose Job over Revelations 8 days a week? And it's just Revelation. Play us a song, Dan. I don't want to embarrass myself. I actually haven't touched my guitar for a surprising amount of time. So I would royally screw anything up if I tried to do that and then get all embarrassed. But I will get back into practice for you. Hey, Dan, do the Samaritan Israelites in the history/scriptures shed light on the study of the Bible? Not a ton. They shed light on the history of the Samaritans, and I actually translated the Samaritan Pentateuch version of Leviticus into English for a project that one of my professors was doing when I was in graduate school. But as far as text critically, not incredibly helpful. In fact, Emmanuel Tove's book, Textual Criticism of the Hebrew Bible, will point out that the Samaritan Pentateuch is closer to the Septuagint in a lot of ways and is kind of secondary to it. So it does not have a ton to add text critically. Should we drop the pastoral epistles from the biblical canon? I mean, the biblical canon is that whole debate is fraught with difficulties, but I think we're just as well off to just acknowledge what it is rather than drop it from the canon. All right, it is 3 o'clock. I'm going to go for a few more minutes, and then I've got to go. I've got to get ready I've got to take my daughter to her rock climbing class here shortly. Dan, do you think there will be a point in time where science becomes so clear that religion is destroyed? No, because the features of the human experience that we group under this rubric religion are evolutionarily installed. So it's not just a question of how clear science is. It is a question of evolution. So yeah, what we call religion is something that is just a part of the human experience. And it would require trying to forcefully stamp it out and actually influence human evolution to entirely eradicate it. And I just don't think that is, one, going to happen, and two, should happen. That would be doing incredible violence to people. Dandolph is not your official title. I accept. Paul, thank you so much for the question. Does Song of Songs contain illegal literature? I don't know what illegal literature is, but no. There's the Song of Songs is it's type of erotic poetry that very quickly took on significance as a metaphor for the relationship of God to their people, and a lot of other significance as well. But yeah, I don't think there's anything illegal about it. Question for my school presentation: does heaven in the Bible describe a place or just the closeness to God? The word heavens in the Hebrew Bible just means the skies. Now, God was thought to live on the other side of the solid dome that made up the skies, the heavens. But concept of heaven as some other dimension or location where the angels and the righteous dwell is more post-biblical than biblical. Question for anybody with oh, excuse me. Question for anybody within the chat: is it just me, or is Dan bullshit here? If you've watched his videos, then it seems massively like he's not a Christian. Thoughts? I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I don't know that I'm acting any differently here than I do in my videos, apart from being slightly goofier. But I am being just as open and honest here as in any other place. Are you related to the wonderful folks of the legendary McClellan Tobacco Company? Not that I'm aware of, and almost certainly not. In academia, I read it used often cultic practices or temple cult. Yes, the word cult in scholarship is used to refer to any facet of religious or social life that involves ritual. So a religion has different facets of it, and whatever part of the religion is associated with worship, that is the cultic facet of that religion. So the more, and then in the late 19th century and early 20th century, there was this attempt to turn cult into a reference to like a specific kind of religion. And it was kind of a less developed kind of religion. And that is the sense that kind of got taken up in the mid 20th century and turned into this pejorative religion I don't like concept. That's where that comes from. Paul, did Paul convert to Christianity overnight? Why? I mean, the text in Acts seems to suggest that, but most scholars would say Acts is not an incredibly historical piece of literature. So I don't know that we could take that author's word for it, that Paul just had an experience and overnight was converted to Christianity. So I don't know that we can say with any confidence. It seems like I missed a couple of those super chat questions. Sorry about that. If you posted those and I didn't see them until now. All right, I'm gonna make sure that I don't have. Does CSR have anything to say about religious OCD? Yeah, like scrupulosity and things like that are a part of CSR. There's a book that I've got sitting there somewhere. Harvey Whitehouse, The Ritual Animal. Imitation and Cohesion in the Evolution of Social Complexity. It talks about how ritual is something that's, again, evolutionarily installed in us and for social purposes. And it extends well beyond the boundaries of what we label religion into all kinds of social interactions. So this is a not incredibly accessible, but a more accessible discussion of what CSR has to say about how ritual works, including things like anxiety and scrupulosity and things like that. So I would recommend that. But yeah, there are things that CSR has to say about OCD. And thank you for the question. What's your favorite Bible fan fiction book? That would probably be First Enoch. Are most of the described events in the Bible and the Book of Mormon inspired parables rather than historical facts? I would say they're mostly social memories, which may or may not have anything at all to do with historical fact. I think inspired is a theological claim that is out of bounds for my channel, but I would say that most of what's going on is people are telling stories frequently that they've inherited, but sometimes that they are creating themselves to generate social cohesion, to generate meaning, to forge links with groups in the past or groups in the present. So they're doing a lot of different things. Okay, answered that question. Looks like it's about time for me to head out. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing out on anyone who has thrown money my way. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope that if you've posted something, I've been able to answer it. I cannot get to everybody. I'm sorry about that. I do my best. I am going to try to make lives on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok a more regular part of my schedule. At some point, I will even start letting people know about them before I actually jump on, so that if you'd like to join, you can. I appreciate your support. This is what allows me to do this for a living. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the very kind words that you've shared with me. And I will see you all around, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. It is the weekend, right? Yes. Okay. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week.